All right, hello, welcome. Hello, good to see everybody. Fantastic Friday here. Lots to talk about. Hope everybody's been having a good day so far. Staying cool, most importantly here. It has been a sweltering afternoon, to say the least. But been a fun one after that, though. Lots of things going on personally, lots of things going on the Illuvium side of things. I know personally, I realized, or just got told about a afternoon ago that I get to go move back into my actual apartment instead of the emergency one I've been kind of working out over this last little bit. Just to get the personal stuff out of the way nice and quick here, but in terms of the broadcast, nothing's going to change at all. Like, I'm not upgrading up to the studio or anything, but just know that I'll be feeling a little bit more at home, which in theory should lead to me sounding a little bit more positive overall. But of course, our actual game plan for the stream here tonight. So of course, the IPL sit and go qualifier portion of the IPL 250, the first IPL 250, has just happened this afternoon. We're going to take a quick look and see what the standings end up looking like. Unofficial results, of course. I do not see any sort of specific announcement as to who, like, confirmed is in the top 32, but I can make reasonable estimations, reasonable guesses, reasonable educated guesses based off of the results that I've been seeing on the websites. After that, it was actually brought up as an idea from somebody on X, actually, from Ziggy Reviews. Shoutouts to them. They had made a comment on one of my recent X posts saying, make a video on which augments to go to and why. And honestly, we might go for it here tonight. Give it our best shot. Of course, I am not an expert, so when the time comes, of course, I am gonna make sure that is well known. Take everything that I say just like a tier list, but with a slight grain of salt. However, I've been playing for a while, and been playing for a while with the augments that have been in the game, so I feel like I can make a reasonable judgment on most of these. So yeah, we might go for it. Depending on how long that takes, we might sneak a game in at the very, very end, but cannot guarantee. Once I start yapping, there is no stopping. Except for breathing pauses, I suppose, now that I get hyper fixated on it. But of course, let's take a look at the IPL side of things here. Probably kill that phone so you're not hearing that vibration the entire time. Sorry about that. Excuse me. Yes, so of course the IPL 250 did just take place, or at least the qualifiers for it, for the sit and go. And I know I personally had the opportunity to play a couple of rounds while this was going on. I know, like, of course, personally, I have a wedding to go to tomorrow. So whether I qualified or whether I didn't qualify and wanted to cast, it wouldn't have been possible for this weekend. But I had a little bit of extra time after doing some errands, so snuck in a couple games. That was a mistake. At least in regards to my rating, because my goodness. With it being so accessible and just hopping into ranked is how you do your qualifications, it does make it super accessible, which is really, really good. However, for someone like myself who was just being super casual today, I found everybody, while I'm trying to chill and just play a couple ranked games, I found everybody when they are trying their absolute hardest, and holy smokes did I get wrecked. I think I played 3 games total today? 7th, 8th, and 8th or something along those lines, and yeah, I took a break after that and just ended up waiting for the Dreamers esports tournament to come around, which kind of worked in my favor a little bit, but of course the big day, and for this just being the qualification, the big day for IPL, the IPL 250 is tomorrow. I believe that it's about 1 o'clock Eastern or 1 o'clock my time, but as we see, 17 UTC, whatever that happens to be for you, will be the start time. And I do like the fact that it's like a couple of best of 2s into a best of 3, if I do recall correctly. And of course, for everybody to qualify from the action here today to get into the event tomorrow, they would have had to either be in the top 8 at the end of the leaderboard, so at the end of the tournament, the official ranked ladder, or make the top 24 from their sit and goes. Of course, I do have all the chats open. Fox Oracle, hello, welcome, welcome, good to see ya. Now, with that, of course, because there was a few people that were on the bubble, so it was kind of interesting. A couple of those players around that 6th, 7th, 8th mark that were on the leaderboard before, they had to play the qualifier anyway, because God forbid somebody has a run during the during the qualifier and knocks them out of it and they didn't participate, they would have lost their invite. I do have it here somewhere. We'll go over. I have a snapshot of what the current top 8 looks like. I took it out of the game at about 6 o'clock. So was this the exact lineup when it cut up at 5:30 or 5 o'clock? I'm not 100% sure. However, I can't imagine it changing that much. Where did I put it? Okay, so I don't have the graphic to pull up, but I do have the snippet. So it ended up being, so Olays Naraba did end up taking first place, with Fox Spirit from Team Atlas right behind them. Web3 Gaming in third. LMNKO from Team Atlas in fourth. Not Complain from Team Hype in fifth. Slicks from Team Hype in sixth. Sorry, Not Complain in fifth. Slicks in sixth. Nefer from Team Phantom in seventh. And then Fury Hype was the one who was on the bubble, but does make it into eighth. So those 8 players, regardless of what happened in the qualifier today, get their invite for the IPL tomorrow. Now, in regards to the other parts, and this is where things get crazy. here. So the qualifiers, of course, the big goal of this entire IPL, of course, is to draw eyes onto Illuvium and show the world that they mean business. Bring them back if they played before. Maybe it wasn't their cup of tea back then, but then see how good it is after all of these improvements. And honestly, compared to most afternoons where we have maybe like 20 to 30 players online, this tournament, so within a 4-hour period, had 251 players competing, which was pretty crazy. And a lot of them new faces, but also what looked like a lot of people who I've not seen in a long time, but yet they've had Illuvatars, yet they have like team tags as if they were like super active as a part of one of our communities. Like I've been seeing a lot of OLAs, a couple hypes, a couple our team players as well, but like from teams that I know, but weren't necessarily active on ranked or in any other community tournaments. So it was really interesting to see 251. One more music adjustment here. I seem to be kind of quiet. There we go. But again, so yeah, 251 people competing in that 4-hour period. Of course, myself included for about 3 of those games until I said, okay, I am absolutely cooked. I couldn't qualify anyway. But definitely good to see. And then, of course, from that qualifier, the top 24 players will move on. I do have that. I'm going to pull it up for you in just a moment's time here. There we go. Of course, yeah, here we go. So yeah, 125 matches played here today, and the top 24 making it on in here. So the one who ended up winning this entire thing, and I do not think that the actual positioning of your finishing position, excuse me, I do not think your finishing position changes anything in regards to where you start tomorrow. I believe as long as you're in the top 24, the exact same thing applies. Like, you're still in the same spot. It's just a matter of qualifying. That being said, I do want to give a couple shoutouts to a lot of these players I'm seeing here, because the most games that I think I've seen people play today was 7, but everybody in this top 5 did not need all 7. So Link's PQP, like 4 wins in a second. That's almost as perfect as you can get for a tournament portion. Leading the charge there. Thanatos Hype, that's a name that I recognize pretty often from the ranked ladder. I see that name and realize, okay, I'm not getting first this round. Very similar situation, 4 wins and a third. Nicely done there. Ole Gaziria. So this is one of those players that I personally just have not seen. Comes on out here with the OLA tag and just, again, 4 wins and a third. Wolverine I've seen around for a little bit, securing 4 wins and a third as well. And now we start going on through the rest here. So Hollow Hype gets to move on. CFGD, player that I've seen a bunch on X actually. Shout out to them making it in without question. And then Fury Hype, just to be safe, of course, had to play being on that bubble spot in 7th or 8th at the time. Getting 7th here secures their leaderboard spot for 8th, so they're going to get the invite. Which means, at least in theory, I don't count Fury Hype here, right? So I would go down to 25. Yeah, Narkish, I do not recognize them, but had a fantastic day for themselves. 3 wins, a second and a third. Potate, I remember from the Leviathan tournament, so absolutely, no, they are going to do a fantastic job in this tournament coming up as well. No pressure, I swear. Here's the thing, if I hype everybody up, I can't commentators curse anybody, so gotta be nice and even here. Of course, Zico Perico, very familiar with them from the Dreamers esports tournaments as well as the Leviathan tournament, did a fantastic job in a lot of those. Patch Tourist, I think I've seen them around a little bit, 2 wins and 3 second places, nicely done there. Johakino Sora. As you can probably tell by my absolute butchering of the pronunciation, I am not familiar with them, but fantastic job getting themselves into the 12th place spot, making it in. Sota Hype, of course, whether it be Dreamers or whether it be Leviathan, I recognize them. Same thing with I'm a Fishy, making it in there. Ma, who's now part of Team Hype, it looks like, so nice little pickup there for Hype. Psycho Hype also getting on in there, seen them once or twice. Good to see them in there. AI Blaze, new face to me, but gets in there. OLA Dash Out, been seeing them a little bit more active as of late, and it pays off, getting themselves into 18th. Gabba, new face to me, but making it in 19th. Okina, new face to me as well. Really had to belt it out there with playing all 7 games, but they grinded their way, and the average placement of 4 is still going to be enough to squeak them in, if I am correct here, at least unofficially. Again, remember, all this is unofficial. This does not take into account any other rulings or anybody who just straight can't make it tomorrow, so they have to go to the next one down. Deno from Phantom is going to make it on in there with the average finish placement of 3rd, playing all 7, but getting the job done. Nika must have had a heck of a run, though, because they only played 4 games. 2 wins in 2 seconds was enough to get them into a qualifying position, into 22nd. Unhappy, I do recognize them from ranked as well as some of the Dreamers esports tournaments. With a pretty solid run, every single game was in the podium, so beautifully done there from Unhappy to make the games count and get themselves in. And then Anubis from Team Signicate. Holy, did they ever just kind of squeak in there, but they absolutely shall. Of the 7 games, they do get 5 podiums, including the 2 wins there, but 2 games must have not necessarily went into their favor. Still does squeak them in 24th. But because Fury Hype is in that top 24, I do believe we get to count one more, which in this case would be Hiroku, which is a new face to me. So another new face making it into the qualifications. And we do see even right below it, so this is definitely heartbreaking for a couple of the players here. Squawk, of course, I recognize personally from a lot of the Dreamers esports tournaments as well as the Leviathan tournaments, barely going to end up missing the qualification. Calyx from Team Phantoms right there as well. Tier 3 Hype, Dr. Spoon, GM Phoenix, Holy Frodo. There's a lot of players here. Texan, G Hamster. There's plenty of good players. Detective Alan A is right there as well. Lots of good players getting very, very far up the ladder, but just barely missing the qualification. Illumination very, very close as well. Still shout out to them for the good run, but just barely going to end up missing here, it looks like. Stygian as well. Team Hype, Yami Yugi. So, kind of crazy to think about because there are so many good players, even still, that can make the comeback later on in this IPL season. And of course, all of these predictions here, all of my saying people have moved on and whatnot, it is unofficial. I'm just going strictly off of what the website says and what the leaderboard says. This does not account for any possible rulings or no-shows that happen tomorrow. Alright. So, the field has been unofficially set. Will be exciting, and with this being just a arena gauntlet, so this isn't Leviathan, so in terms of the alluvials that you own, that does not make a difference. The only difference of the alluvials that you own or not is whether they're hollow or dark hollow or not, which of course is just an aesthetic thing or a cosmetic thing, and not a gameplay influencing thing. So it does not matter what your collection looks like. Everybody is going to be on an even playing field here. So with all the players, I mean, in terms of predictions, I mean, the easiest thing for me as a prediction would just to be, oh yeah, go for your top 3, right? So go for whatchamacallit, go for OLA's Naraba, go for Fox Spirit, go for Web3 Gaming. But I mean, there's plenty of people that can absolutely turn this around and find themselves the winner of this one. It is nice though that it is best of 2 even in the early rounds, so nobody's gonna really get cheesed out by one. But in terms of favorites, I mean, OLA and Fox Spirit probably have to be, or OLA, Naraba and Fox Spirit rather, have to be my favorites going into this. Nothing against Web3 or anything like that. I would love to see them make a play or make anybody make the play here. But if I were to give a underdog from somebody who specifically came out of the qualifier and not the top 8, let me think. My absolute commentator's blessing. This is not commentator's curse, I swear. I swear this is not going to be a commentator's curse, right? No, but CFGD, let's see what you got. CFGD, maybe Zico Perico, and Patate you can't sleep on either. So those are, I guess, my 5. But if I were to specifically pick one as the underdog, CFGD, it's all you, mate. That wraps up the IPL portion of it. I'm not sure if there's going to be any stream for it, unfortunately, but of course through the website that Rich from Illuvium has made, the Illuvalytics. If you go through Illuvalytics, it will show all of the lobby codes to the games that are in progress, so you can still watch if you do have access to the actual Illuvium game in front of you. And who knows, maybe Naraba or somebody will stream their point of view as well. I did not see any sort of announcement from anything from Illuvium in particular, so I'm not quite sure what's going to end up happening there. Of course, in theory, for like the upcoming weeks and whatnot, for the rest of the IPL events, or at least as many IPL events as I can, I would absolutely love to do some commentary and do some coverage of it. But it's just unfortunately not in the cards for this weekend in particular. Had a wedding planned to go to for the last month or so. Cannot renege on that at the last minute. So I personally won't be a part of it, but I'll see you in the next week. Okay. Quick coffee breather, and then let's get on into the augments, why don't we? Okay, change this music up to something a little quieter. Okay. Alrighty then. Thank you for waiting. So this next part, we're going to be talking about augments in the Illuvium Arena, because there are so many different augments, whether it be the normal ones, whether it be the legendary ones, and it honestly can be rather difficult to figure out which ones are actually supposed to go where. So I'm going to do my very, very best here to try and at least give my insights as someone who's been playing Illuvium Arena for a little while here as to where I would use each individual augment. I do want to preface this, of course, with it being that I am not a professional player by any means, nor do I have any professional playing experience in games similar to Illuvium Arena, but been playing for a little while, been playing a lot on the recent patches as well, so the updated augments I am very well aware of. And I'm going to do my very, very best to kind of go through them all. For those that may be a little newer joining us here in the Illuvium Arena, to at least get you in the right ballpark, and then from there, use your own judgment and do your own research to kind of push yourself for that extra mile. By all means, if anybody, of course, this is being streamed live and recorded live, so if anybody realizes that I've actually made a mistake in regards to any of the augments, by all means, I have the chats of every platform open. I'll gladly take the feedback. There is no negativity, no hard feelings by any means. At the end of the day, just trying to be educated, trying to get better. And I don't mind being wrong. It means I learned something. Pulling everything up in just a minute. So I'm going to start from the top. So basically starting off with the legendary augments, which these are the hardest ones to end up finding, but they're usually the ones that make the biggest difference in terms of what your playstyle should end up being and make the biggest impact in regards to whichever alluvial it ends up being put on. So behind me over on my Bristol board, this thing's going to turn into my screen here in a second. I'll put the picture of each augment so you don't have to just trust what I'm saying and go off of names. I'll give you the visual so you can make that connection in-game. Because I know, even personally, I may only know like 3 or 4 of the names of the actual augments off by heart without looking at a picture. And even then, there's still some augments that I know personally I'm still thinking of doing different effects from different patches. So we'll go through this together, and I'll do my best to kind of point you in the right direction. The first legendary augment that I do have popped up here. This one is the Adaptive Reflection. So this thing used to be busted, but it's kind of gotten itself a little bit nerfed over the last couple of patches, where when you throw this onto your alluvial, it takes, or as it takes damage, every time it takes damage, it gains 2 resistance up to 50 stacks, so up to 100 resistance. And then for surviving 10 seconds, it then begins to deal 40% of the combined resistances as pure damage. So of everything around it as well, every 2 seconds. So 20 hexes to be specific about it. But with it, you throw this thing onto a tank that you know will live for a long time, and then it starts to kind of return fire a little bit with a little, as I'll keep calling it, reflective damage, or like thorns kind of damage, where it starts hurting everything around it. The best case scenario I feel like to use this thing is honestly when you're going for a heavy bulwark composition. So like personally, I love running 5 bulwarks because I end up getting the natural affinity boost where it allows for reflective damage every time you get hit based off of my resistances. So if I can put this on one of my better tanks, give it more resistance, so every time it gets hit, the bulwark affinity or the bulwark class is making it so that they're taking more damage every time they hit me. That's absolutely beautiful, on top of the additional damage that comes out after 10 seconds. thing is, though, you want a tank that can actually survive with this. Like, personally, if you have the Clang, like the Twine or Gnarl or something like that, I would not put this on it. But, I mean, you have a Goliath, you have a, let's say, like a completely decked out, like Seer or something like that. It could be absolutely disgusting as long as you have some investment into your tank. You could probably do it without 5 Bulwarks, for example. However, I'd recommend that the Adaptive Reflection not be the only augment that you put on your tank. Have another tank augment on top of it, so that you know for sure that that tank can make it to that 10-second mark at least. So you're at least getting, at minimum, 1 proc of damage. Optimally, you want way more, of course, because this thing could go the entire round. But you want it for sure on something that's going to last 10 seconds, but also taking damage. Don't put this on your healer or something that's sitting at the back, because it's not going to gain any resistances, because it's not going to be taking any damage. This has to be put on a tank. And next up here, all right. Next up here is the Arcane Conduit. So this thing you want onto one of your mages, or maybe on one of your AD carries, or one of your like auto attack kind of carry characters, because it basically takes 35% of your attack damage, grants it to your Illuvial as then Omega Power, and every attack you do generates 10 additional energy. So I mean, I've seen instances where people have put this onto, say, like their Scariox, where it's then being able to proc its ability to get the additional attack speed and the additional explosive damage. And that can be pretty devastating, but I can see this just as well working on mages. I know personally I've thrown this thing onto my Octias, Aphisto, my Alfie, what have you. I've seen some psychopaths put it on a Fleesh, and I mean, it is what it is, you know where I stand on that, but basically, whether it's something that has a very, very strong ability, or something that attacks really, really fast that then gets its ability augmented, like say a Scoriox, that's where I would put it. But either way, it's going mainly on your mage carry, and then maybe a Scoriox. Some might dispute that, but mages mainly. Hold. I forgot about the polar bear. Okay, so I totally forgot about the mole line. So the polar bears could absolutely love this as well. Their bite is a ridiculous ability. Good chunk of damage, and I believe it heals you for a little bit as well. So this is an instance where it already has a ton of attack damage. So it is going to get transitioned over to Omega Power to make that bite that much stronger. And then because you're getting the additional energy, it means you get your bite way faster. That's another good way of using it, or any other Illuvial that has something very, very similar going on, but those are the ones that specifically come to mind for me right now. Next up, next up will be the Blightfire. So this thing in particular, gain 250 max health, gain 25 resistances, burn and poison enemies within 25 hexes. And then again, for burn, that is in reference to reducing the amount of healing that target then receives, in this case by 50%. And then poison means that it's doing 2% of the target's max health as pure damage per second. So another kind of situation where we're going to be putting this onto one of your tanks, at least in my opinion, or a bruiser of some sort. Say the polar bear could very well make this work as well. However, I think Polar Bear would rather have a little bit of damage compared to this. So, at least to me personally, I would put this on, to use an Overwatch term here, I would put this on an off tank. So not the main one leading in, but one who's maybe taking like 1 or 2 opponents like with very, very low damage, not necessarily going after the biggest threat. Because this one, you want to survive as long as possible to keep that healing reduction and poison active. If you put it on your main tank and it gets demolished immediately, that debuff is gone. So put this on something that you know isn't going to be your like your main tank that you want to keep around for a little while here. Optimally, it would be a second or a third tank, but I can see it being done where maybe you put this around like a fighter or something along those lines. But again, you probably want the attack damage on your item instead. But again, yeah, I would put this on a tank that isn't your lead tank. And especially if you see that a player that is doing really, really well is going for like a bunker composition or using a lot of nature or a lot of empaths, this could be the difference maker between you breaking that bunker or not. So definitely recommend picking it up when the time is right. It's not necessarily a must pick for every game, but it has its time and place, and it's good at what it does. Okay, Celestial Cycle for this next one here. On Omega, it gives all allies 7 Omega power and an energy regen. So, you need to put this on something with a rather quick charging ability, while also optimally playing something that like really amplifies off of getting more Omega power, which granted, you could kind of splash it into really any composition. But I know personally, I love Bunker, I love Scions, and I would take this every time that I could. But in regards to like a fast Omega that charges pretty quickly, one that does come to mind is the Axel line. So, or not the Axel, the Atlas line. With the Atlas Axon or the Axodon. It pops its shield extremely quickly, and then it starts recharging that shield while the shield's still alive, right? So it's popping a thing very, very quickly. In theory, the Axodon is your off tank, so it's not the center of attention. It's going to survive for a long time, and every time it pops that shield, it's giving all of your allies the Omega power, and then what I'd argue more importantly is that energy regen, so that you're just firing off your abilities way faster than your opponent, which, especially if you're playing something like Scion where you want to burst something real quick, that is a major difference maker. So that's where I would use the Celestial Cycle. Chrono Guard. This one's a weird one to me. So you immediately gain 100 resistances with the Chrono Guard, but every time you're hit, you lose 2 resistance, but then heal 1% of your health back and gain energy damage. So this one is extremely strange to me because you want it on a tank. In theory, like, I should love this when I'm using my 5 bulwarks because I'm immediately getting more resistances to then do that reflective damage. But at the same time, because it kind of just goes down, falls away, and has additional energy damage attached to it, I want it on something that's not necessarily a pure tank. Something that actually has like a relatively decent ability, which, I mean, granted, you do have a couple of decent picks. The first one that comes to mind again is Axodon, because that shield, of course, explodes at the end of its duration and does energy damage, so you'd be making that stronger as you're staying tanky. Granted, you're losing your tank, but you're also being healed and you're also shielded anyway. So it's something to keep in mind. But even something like the Scarabok or the Goliath Titanor kind of line, where their ability Sure, it's mainly used for the stun, but it does actually pack quite a decent punch. Maybe that could work on a frontline tank as well. The frontline tank or a main tank. Put it directly into the line of fire. But I would not do that if you have Granite active, because then you're just going to be losing value since you have the invulnerability from Granite. So it is a little bit comp dependent. Sure, it gives you a ton of resistances right off the start, but it is going to fall off and eventually give you energy damage instead. You got to try and find that balance between survivability and making value with that damage. But I can see a Scarabok, for example, taking it just fine. Goliath would be a good idea, of course, as long as you're not using Granite. Axodon would be a cool idea. Gnarl would entwine Cling, that'd probably be cool as well. Make it so that their vines do more damage. That'd be pretty cool, actually. That's one way to do it. That's how I would use Chrono Guard specifically. The only other thing that I could randomly theory craft off the top of my head here is maybe giving this to an Archelion. Or a support of some sort. So that it's going to have a bunch of tankiness when it inevitably gets dove on, but not immediately. But at the same time, if you're into that kind of position, then you're asking yourself, what happened to make your supports get attacked anyway? And I mean, if you're playing up against rogues, maybe it's inevitable. So maybe it might not be a bad idea in that instance, because instead of the energy damage, that energy is going towards, say in the Archelion's instance, the heal and the root damage from its ability. So that might be another way of doing it. Speaking of Granite, okay, so the next one we got coming up here. Gotta figure out how to pronounce this thing, the Corbomite Protocol. So this thing is basically like giving Granite to your Illuvial. When you give it to the Illuvial, and then whenever it is on, it's invulnerable for the first seconds of battle. So it's not going to take any damage at all. Just very, very similarly to what Granite would do. Then once the 6 seconds is done, you gain mitigation, 30 mitigation in particular, and 20 thorns, so that you do a little bit of reflective damage, and then mitigation is damage reduction. So this is basically for your lead tank. I would not put this on a Goliath, especially if you're using Granite, because this on top of Granite does nothing. It's going to cancel each other out, with the only proc being maybe the mitigation and thorns after the fact. But any of my other tanks that I'd want to charge on in here, like say maybe you get the Cardalox up in there, get the Bull in there, or the Blotto or something along those lines. The Blotto is the first one that kind of comes to my mind, because that's one that you really want to survive. Fire off as many of those smoke screens that you can. If you get the wildfire going, you can really just get that first wildfire off while you're still invulnerable. So when you finally start taking damage, you're just healing it right back up. That would be how I think about it. So very, very, again, heavy in regards to tank line value. But I would put this on whatever tank of yours is going to hit the enemy first, to make sure that you're getting maximum value of that invulnerability state. Eternal Hunger. So right off the start, you get 8% Omnivamp, 8% attack damage, and 8% crit chance, but you get more of it every time you land a takedown. So start things off, of course, just getting the 8% Omnivamp, attack damage, and crit chance is already very, very solid to put onto one of your carries, one of your auto attackers. Actually, it doesn't even have to necessarily be auto attackers, because Omnivamp also does trigger off of your ability damage. So any high damage dealer is going to absolutely love this, and you have snowball potential if you can find at least the one takedown, keep it going, get the buff again, get another takedown, get the buff again. So you're going to absolutely become an unstoppable menace. And if your tank, or not if your tank, but if your alluvial happens to be one that can be a little bit elusive, it can become an unstoppable menace. So what comes to my mind specifically here would be something along the lines of the Slappin, or like the Penguin line, or say the Umber, like the Dash line. But both of those being rogues, but immediately getting this, and then say for the Umber, for an instance, if you get a takedown and you get your ability off, and now you're untargetable, everybody's going after something else, and it's just letting you eat away at the backline. You get 1, 2, 3 takedowns. You've procced that buff a total of 4 times. By the end game, even if you're outnumbered between that and your untargetability, you can absolutely mess them up. So it is a very, very good one. I think there's a good reason as to why we see this thing with one of the higher win rates according to Illuvialytics, with 46%. So this is one that I've personally been sleeping on, but at the same time, I also don't play a lot of rogue. So that might be something, but I've definitely been sleeping on it personally, but that's how I would use the Eternal Hunger. Alright, speaking of elusiveness, the Elusive Veiling. So right off the rip, you get 20 Omega Power and 20% Omnivamp, so you're going to be very, very strong in terms of sustaining. But then once per combat, once you get very low, so 25% health, you become untargetable and invulnerable. So not only do you disappear from the enemy, but any stray abilities coming on through, any AoEs, you don't have to worry about for 3 seconds. And then you also get 40% attack speed. This is absolutely beautiful on so many different alluvials, it's not even funny. The easiest one that I think about, of course, would be the Scoriox, having the emergency button of sorts, where the Omnivamp and Omega Power sure is going to help with your everyday battling, but then the ability where it procs you at 25% health, goes invulnerable and untargetable, and you gain your attack speed. It can allow you to clutch things up extremely well, as long as what knocked you below 25 doesn't kill you outright. Because it doesn't just stop at 25% health. If you got jumped on by a rogue and they nuked you, this isn't gonna save you. But if you're just getting whittled down, just kind of getting peppered from the ability of the Blazonite across the board from you or something like that, this could be the difference maker between clutching up around or not. The other obvious one here for me would be the Ramphy line, because the biggest problem with Rampies, Rampites, Rampfires, of course they have that gigantic polarizing AoE nuke, a ring of fire of sorts, but it does take a little while to charge on up, so optimally everybody wants to dump as much damage into you as possible, take you off the board, and then move on with their life. But you put this on it, if everybody's just using their auto attacks on you and you're not really getting bursted by abilities, you're just going to go untargetable as soon as you go to 25%, and that 3 seconds is plenty of time to finally get that one Omega ability off and burst everybody around you. And then you're going to come out of that with a ton of attack speed on top of that. So put it on your rogue, put it on your Scoriox, put it on your fighters. Fighters would be a fantastic choice for this as well. Put it on the bear, put it on the foe. Hell, put it on the penguin. Like it can shine on a ton of alluvials. You don't have to be too picky with it. the untargetable is just beautiful, and the attack speed on top of that is just chef's kiss. Final Abounding. This one's interesting. I have not tested this as much as I would like to, which as somebody who plays a lot of Scion is kind of criminal, I'm not going to lie. But what this does is, because normally Omegas cannot critically strike. They have their set damage adjusted by your Omega power, your items that you have on top of it, and then you do basically a fixed amount of damage. Allowing it to crit can do some pretty disgusting things. So any sort of alluvial that has a very, very strong ability can be disgusting, and there's certain things I'd absolutely love to test. Like personally, I love Alfie. The water blast from one side of the board to the other, hitting everything in its line. I wonder, is it every tick has its own crit chance? Or if the first one crits, does everything crit? I'm guessing it's the first one where every tick has a chance of critting, but that would be pretty disgusting either way. The next obvious one would of course be the official or the squeeze line, the lightning bolts. If those lightning bolts critting would be absolutely ridiculous, and you always fire off 2. So 25% chance on the 2 bolts, that's pretty crazy. If you get the reset, you can possibly do it again. That's like pretty crazy. You line up a bunch of items on the Octius, for example. You're doing a good chunk anyway. If it crits on top of that, you could get into the position where maybe you're starting to one-shot some low health units. Or not low health, but like squishy units. So that can be extremely valuable. I have not tested that anywhere near enough. And this thing's sitting up there alongside the Eternal Hunger for probably some of the highest win rates in regards to legendary augments, 47% as of the time of this recording. So extremely valuable. I've been personally sleeping on this. Get it onto anybody whose Omega does a big old chunk. It can be, I've been talking about mages, but I mean the same thing can kind of apply to fighters, rogues, anything that naturally has really good Omega damage. Throw this on top of that and just watch you nuke things. Next up, the Jagged End. Now this, I believe, okay, no, it doesn't have the highest win rate, but I sure as heck see this a lot. Where you give this to an alluvial, first and foremost, it gives 30% attack speed buff, but it also gives you 15 attack range. So you can give this to a fist fighter, give this to a rogue that usually is stuck kind of being up close and personal, and making them a ranged fighter. And then 30% of the holder's attack speed is received as crit amp. So if I'm recalling that correctly, that's of course not how often you crit, but when you do crit, how much damage extra does it do? Some of the godly combos I've seen with this thing especially revolves around the Penguin. The slap and line, of course. Its ability gives it some additional range as is, and makes it hard enough as is to actually target. So if you give it the Jagged End here, giving it attack speed, which that alluvial is basically all based on attack speed as well, it could be absolutely unstoppable, destroying your team with high damage from a safe distance. And it's very, very hard to deal with. Best case scenario, of course, would be with rogues because of the crit amp. rogues have your best chances at actually landing crits. So again, Penguin is perfect. Throw it onto the Umber as well. I've seen that work. Turns the doggy basically into a ranged carry that can also just disappear, so you can throw it into the back line or something like that. You can get ridiculous with it. And Jagged End, alongside putting any other additional items onto a rogue in particular, is pretty crazy. So yeah, Jagged End, beautiful for pretty well anybody you want to give extra range to. That relies a little bit on dealing some good auto attacks. Again, fighters can also kind of go into here, but because of that crit, I would or the crit amp, I would definitely suggest a rogue. Leviathan's Fury. This thing is nuts because it attacks deals, like the ability, excuse me, this thing is nuts because 6% of the target's max health just gets added to your normal auto attacks as additional pure damage. So if you're tanky, it does not matter. If you're squishy, it does not matter. As long as you are attacking fast, you are getting so much additional value with this item or with this augment on you. So again, bring this over to rogues, bring this over to fighters. Because there's no specific buff to crits, I would put this basically equal in regards to if you put this on a fighter or if you put this onto a rogue, put this onto a ranged carry of sorts. I wouldn't put this onto a mage, but fighter, rogue, Scoriox, like this could all just be super, super valuable. This way, no matter, again, which target you're hitting, you know that you're going to chunk it. It's a pretty simple one, but just 6% of target's max health. Not current health, max. So the bigger they are, the harder they're going to fall. Lifestorm. Now this one is bunker composition specific. So I've seen some people try to put this thing on a tank that is very, very close to the rest of the tanks and kind of have them huddle together. But I've seen very, very limited success with that. What you'll oftentimes see is, say, with a bunker composition, a lot of nature kind of compositions led by an Archelion in the center of the team. The Archelion would have this item on top of it, and it would heal everything around it slowly but surely. To be specific, it's 1% of the holder's maximum health every second, as well as giving it 2 energy every second. And it also gives the holder some additional health as well. So with a bunker composition, like, let's be honest, there's a lot of stray hits that kind of show up into the backline in this game currently. So whether it be like Blazonites firing off their tornadoes or beams or like other versions of splash damage, there's a lot of random splash damage that kind of happens that bunker compositions have to deal with. Normally the empath shield is enough to deal with it, but having this extra redundancy here with the Lifestorm can help you out in those late game or late round scenarios where your tanks have kind of fallen. Now it's on the empaths to try and tank it, and just being able to constantly be healing every single second doesn't sound like a lot, but it can be valuable. That being said, it does feel like one of the weaker augments as of right now. So do keep that in mind. It's only got a 31% win rate compared to some of these other augments that we're seeing here. But again, it's also super, super specific. You have to be playing bunker to get like maximum value. And the 25 hexes of heal is much smaller than you think. Like, you have to be pretty much right on top of your Archelion to get the value from it. So God forbid a Winx charms you out of the area or something like that, you then just immediately lose your buff. So it's hard to use right now, but there is still value in a bunker composition for it. The Omnisource Surge. Now, this thing is ridiculous. So, off the rip, you get 20 Omega Power, and then every 5 seconds you gain an additional 10 Omega Power and an additional 10% energy resistance piercing. So, Scions, what their big issue is for the most part is they really do rely on getting all of that burst damage up front and taking out some key targets quickly so that the rest of the fights kind of go into their favor slowly but surely for the rest of the round. But people have gotten really good at positioning around some of the mages or some of the Scions in particular, like say Alfie, for example. The Alfie is predictable to kind of play around, so it can be kind of avoided and mitigated. The one that can't really be predicted, of course, is the Ophisto or the squeeze line. The lightning is coming no matter what, just to whatever has the lowest health. But players start kind of figuring out to get tankier, and if you're, as a Scion, if you don't win quickly, you oftentimes just don't win. This is kind of the counter to help you negate that, where the longer the game goes or the longer the round goes, the more damage you're going to do. But again, it is only to whichever Illuvial is holding it, so this has to be your mage. 100%, this has to be your Octius, your Ophisto, or your Alfie, whomever you might happen to be using. And just hoping that you can keep them in a position to stay alive, just keep raining down their damage so that it's scaling throughout the battle, so that you're not so reliant on your first rotation of abilities doing enough to win the round by itself. It helps to be a little bit more consistent when playing Scions. Probably one of the scariest augments in the game here. This is the Power's Ascent. You have to keep yourself alive for 15 seconds, whichever Illuvial is holding this. But when you do, you double your max health and get 15% damage amp, so 50% like increased damage, while also becoming tankier with 15% extra damage reduction. So you'd think like, okay, this would be fantastic on a tank, and to some extent you're absolutely correct. Like I just got completely demolished earlier in a Daydream tournament match where somebody put the Power Ascent onto a Seer, and I would have 6 Scions alive versus the 1 Seer, and I would still lose. Granted, it also had some other items on top of it as well, but by it being able to double its health, increase its tank, and increase its damage, it's absolutely crazy. But what I've also seen this be done for is for Brawlers and then Scoriox. So give this to the Polar Bear, give this to a Jotun, give this to a Forus, who's point blank constantly in the heat of battle, and it becomes an unstoppable menace for the most part, especially though if you have other augments with that Illuvial in particular. I wouldn't go as far as say as soon as you put the Power's Ascent onto an Illuvial that it wins, because that is absolutely not the case, but it becomes something that has to be dealt with quickly and immediately has to be put on the radar of your opponent, whether you try to focus it down quickly, take it out before that 15 seconds mark. Because before the 15 seconds, this augment does nothing. It strictly relies on you staying alive. But once it gets it, it is absolutely crazy. Again, don't make it the only augment you have on a damage dealer or a tank. Supplement it with a little bit extra, and then you'll watch as everybody just becomes terrified of whatever it is that you put this Power's Ascent on. Okay, Retribution's Call. So this thing is strictly for your tank, probably your main tank, and its ability is extremely simple. You just gain 1,000 max health, so a big time health buff, as well as getting 30 thorns. So extra reflective damage when you take a hit. It's probably one of the more underwhelming of the legendary augments, but it's still extremely valuable. I mean, throwing 1,000 health onto a tank and giving it 30 thorns, need I say more, that is just extremely valuable in its own right. I wouldn't put this onto a brawler or support or anything along those lines, because at the same time you want whatever is holding this to actually get hit, so it has to be a tank. Just give this to a tank. Ruination Force. Ruination Prism, not Ruination Force. I think I combined two things there. Okay. One more time. Ruination Prism. So, give this to your Illuvial, you immediately gain 20% damage amp, and your attacks steal resistances from the target. So, if you know someone's doing very, very well while also using a lot of bulwarks, you go up against me. Well, I mean, I wouldn't be doing very well, but I'd be having 5 bulwarks. But you throw this on your damage dealer, and you're just going to be taking away my resistances and making me squishier and squishier over time. And this one is very splashable. It doesn't really matter what kind of damage dealer. Heck, doesn't even necessarily have to be a damage dealer. I've seen people put this on Archelion and actually do well with it. So, very splashable. Just know you're going to be getting 20% damage amp and stealing resistances, making whatever you hit a little bit squishier. Longer the game goes, longer the round goes, better it does for you. Times Respite. So this one's pretty fun, actually. With this, every time you use your Omega, the holder will gain a shield and then heal up to 300% of the energy cost of your Illuvial, and then become immune. So, layman's terms, what the heck did I just spew out of my mouth? So basically, whatever you give this to has the opportunity to just become an absolute tanky menace, as long as its Omega comes out relatively quickly, or you do the opposite and give it to something that has a long charge, and each one will feel more valuable. So it goes one of two ways here. So like personally, if I were to throw this on a Forest, for example, it charges its ability pretty quickly. So every couple seconds, I can be happy with the fact that even though it's point blank fighting in the battle, it's getting a heal and it's getting a shield. And becomes immune for every 5 seconds. Well, to be honest, the Forest is probably just being completely immune then for the rest of the battle, as long as it's not getting stunned. But at the same time, though, I've seen people throw this on to, say, like a Blotto, where it will take a little bit longer to charge, but once it pops its smoke screen and blinds everything, it then heals a big chunk because it took a long time to charge that ability, and then a big shield, so when everything starts hitting it again, it just shields it all. And then by the time the shield drops, it's probably halfway ready for its next charge. So just constantly being able to heal yourself and shield yourself every time you pop your Omega is extremely valuable. I've seen, and what I've even tried before, in regards to using it on a Scion, I've actually given this to my Octius before, because it gets its Omega ability relatively quickly, just to stop stray damages or Alphys or Rogue like targeting it and one-shotting it, just to kind of keep it in there. I definitely don't recommend it. There's better ways to do it, but it's very, very splashable. But I would either put it on something that's firing off its Omega quickly, so you're constantly getting a small shield, or put it on a frontliner that may have a little bit of a longer Omega charging time, but every time it pops, it's huge. That's how I'd use Time's Respite. Okay. Next one up here is Titan's Redoubt. So very, very simple one here. Again, kind of dedicated towards a tank, but gain 50% max health and resistances. This just screams, put this on a Scarabok, put this on the Goliaths, put this on a already high health individual to get maximum value. So any of your tanks is probably the best idea with here. Really don't have to break it down too much here. Just put it on a high health target. Valthrax. Now this one is an interesting one as well. Holder will gain True Sight, 30% piercing, and attack speed. In regards to True Sight, this just means that your attacks cannot be dodged. So this screams, put it on an auto attacker. So get this on your Scoriox, get this on your Slashin, of course the Penguin, get this on any of your rogues, especially if the rogues don't necessarily rely on their ability to do a ton of damage, and you will melt whatever is in front of you. That extra 30% piercing means that even tanky targets get chunked. And there is a reason why this thing has a very, very high win rate, kind of tied up there with the Eternal Hunger and the Jagged End. God forbid something crazy where you get multiple of these in the same game, then oh god, I pray for you. But yeah, Valthrax, pretty simple. Just put this on one of your attack damage carries, especially an auto attacker. And the last of our legendary augments is going to be the Void Cleaver. Very, very simple effect, but don't discredit it for how damn good it is. So its attacks will, every time you auto attack, that attack will then chain to 3 additional enemies. So you've hit 4 things total. Each of those extra hits do 20% less damage, which, okay, sure, fair enough. You gotta balance it somehow, because God forbid, you put this thing on a Scoriox, again, you put this on Penguin, you put this on an Umber, any auto-attacking reliant damage dealer, and now normally auto-attacking damage dealers are very single target focused. You've now turned yourself into a splash damage menace. And you can absolutely just clean front lines, back lines, you name it. You'll absolutely destroy, especially if you've invested other augments into said alluvial. Like maybe you happen to have some other augments that do piercing or additional attack damage. That all stacks in, and it gets very, very nasty very, very quickly. So Void Cleaver, again, just put it onto one of your auto attack centric carries. And with that, that is all of the legendary augments broken down. I am absolutely going to be going over the regular augments as well, because this is just one piece of the puzzle of the Illuvium Arena. Still plenty more to learn, plenty more to think about, and we'll get into that just up here. Debating on splitting this into a 2-part video. I feel like I probably yaps for about an hour just on the legendaries alone. Have not even touched the regulars yet. I'll have to think about it. Get all situated here for the regular augments. Do an intro as if this is new. Scratch it on post later if we have to. Quick coffee break one more time here before we get into it. Alrighty. Of course, big thank you to everybody tuning into this live. One thing note from this one, I'm not going to be going over the matrices or the modules in regards to just changing your or adding a class to your alluvial. Those ones in theory should be pretty straightforward. This will just be in particular about the augments. Alright, so we gone over the legendary augments in the Illuvium Arena, but we have not quite touched on the regular ones yet, and there are plenty of them, and lots to look at in regards to how to make them work and get the most value from them while you are competing, of course, in the arena. So I'm going to go over every single one in this current patch, of course, patch 1.12, and of course, I am not necessarily a esports professional or professional player by any means, but I've been playing the Illuvium Arena for quite a while now, and specifically on the latest couple of patches where the augments have worked in the same or similar fashion that they do right now, and I'll give you my best insights as to how you should use each of these. First one we're going to go over is the Adaptive Carapace, where this one gains you 10 resistances for every this one gives you 10 resistances for each enemy that targets you, or that specific alluvial. So anything that is going to be thrown into the front line and getting the focus of your opponents first is where you're going to find the most value. Of course, you can start getting pretty ridiculous if you're using 5 bulwarks, for example, where your resistances actually ends up as reflective damage for every time something hits you. The more things that targets you, the more damage you'd then be giving back to them. But even without going for a bulwark composition, you can still make huge value with one alluvial in particular, and that's the Carablue line. So the Carablue, Cardalo, or the Cardalox, because it has a taunt and it forces things to attack it, if you put it front and center, get it to taunt, and get it to taunt a good crowd, and say you manage to get like 4 or 5 alluvials to attack you at the same time, that resistance buff becomes 40 or 50, and it's just slowing down the opponent from getting to your juicy targets. So a very, very valuable augment. It currently has one of the better win rates I've seen here, with a win rate of about 58% in the current patch over the last couple of matches from the last 7 days. So it's definitely one to keep an eye on. Whether it be one of your main tanks or you happen to have said Cardalo or Cardalox, those would be the best times to use it. Okay, next up, Aether Steel. Alright, so Aether Steel. So on Omega, steal on Omega, steal 6 Omega power from the highest Omega power enemy. In regards to statistics, this gives you 20 Omega power with 5% crit chance and 5% crit amp. So with those kind of statistics, it is suggesting going towards a damage dealer, going towards a rogue of sorts, or maybe one of your fighters, but something that's firing off its Omega ability relatively quickly so that you're just constantly stealing Omega power. With the main thing, of course, being that your Omega's coming out quickly. So something like a Forest, it might be a fighter, but you're charging that thing up very, very quickly. You don't mind having the Omega power, crit chance, or crit amp because you're getting your auto attacks off very quickly anyway, and your ability does hit pretty hard as is. Buffing it would be absolutely nice. But I've also seen people attempt to do this for some of the tanks that maybe get their ability pretty quickly, like say the Axodon. That Omega power can then just get put towards its shield. But again, extremely, extremely niche. I would rather put that onto my rogue, or rather that put it onto a fighter that has a very, very fast charging Omega. Okay, next one, Apex Supercharger. Very, very straightforward, nothing too fancy here. 40 Omega power plus 3% damage amp. At this point, you're just trying to make whatever you give this have a ton more damage for their ability. The obvious go-to one would be mages or your scions, but at the same time, you can give this to your rogue, give this to your fighter, and it's going to make it hit just that much harder. Very, very straightforward, but very, very powerful. The Apex Supercharger. Okay, next up, Arcane Accelerator. Gives you 20 Omega power as well as 5% Omnivamp. So you heal when you do damage by auto attack or ability. And the main extra ability that this gives you is gain 5 Omega power every 5 seconds. This kind of lines up very, very similarly to one of the legendary augments we saw in the past video. But basically, again, Scions, for the most part, their big weakness is losing the teams that can tank their first initial burst of damage, and then the Scions end up getting run over. What this allows is that the longer this goes, your Scion, say in this instance, will just become that much more deadly. As it goes on, the damage will scale and allow you to fight a little better into your second or third rotation of your abilities, while also being a little bit more self-sustaining with that Omnivamp. That being said, though, this does not stay limited to just mages. At the same time, you give this over to a fighter that does have a solid Omega ability, say your Riptorus or your Polar Bear, your foe. Anything that does have a pretty decent damaging ability, and that Omnivamp is going to do you wonders and keep you sustaining and maybe make that bite or make that sting do that much more damage as it goes on. So whether it be a mage or whether it be a frontline brawler, as long as it's on a alluvial that you expect to not get targeted down immediately, you will absolutely find value. And if this happens to be one of the last alluvials alive at the end of the round, it is going to be extremely tough to take down. I had to do a double take when looking at the win rate for this augment right here, the Chronoflux. An 80% win rate for anybody who happens to be getting this augment right now, because it may be very, very simple, but it is so stupid effective. You get 20% extra attack damage, and every time you attack, you get an additional 2% attack speed. Whether it be on your Scoriox shooting from afar, throw it onto your Penguin, throw it onto your Dash or another Rogue, throw it onto your Fighter, this thing is so splashable. As long as it's consistently doing auto attacks, you will find value in this, and it is going to be firing off faster, faster, and faster as the game goes on. Those who may have watched a couple of my streams might have heard me referring to the Blazonite or the Fernite as the super chicken, and that's because somebody throws a Chronoflux onto a Fernite, and with it sitting in the back line just constantly auto-attacking, by the time the end game rolls around, it looks like the damn Fernite is having a seizure in the back line because it's spazzing around firing off so many auto-attacks. So if the amount of flexibility that this Chronoflux allows for, and with how good it is, definitely keep it in mind. Try and see if you can pick this up whenever possible. Next up shall be the Elder Surge. So, let's see here. In regards to statistics, this just gives you about 150 health and 15 Omega Power, but the ability alongside it is that the holder's allies will receive 15% more healing, but then after that, the holder themselves also will get additional healing, but double the amount of healing, so about 30% more healing. If I'm reading this correctly, or it could be double the heal. I haven't unfortunately kind of crunched the numbers, but either way, you want this on a target that you do not want to die, basically, but you know that they're going to survive a little bit for at least the early game. So at least personally, the go-to here for me is I would throw this onto my Adoro, the deer that heals, or throw this onto an Archelion, because it does have the chance to heal itself, but it is tanky, at least off the start. But you'd want your first initial rotation of heals to buff the rest of your allies first. So I'd give the Archelion, say for example, this Elder Surge, and then when it starts getting into that late round scenario where the Archelion themselves might actually be the ones getting hit, at least they're then receiving double the amount of healing, stalling out the opponent's DPS that much more, so hopefully my backline could be clutching it out for the squad. So, personally, I would put this onto a healer, but at the same time, I could also see you putting this onto a Nature Alluvial with Verdant, which again, of course, is the Archelion, but at the same time, this could also mean the Twine or the Gnarl. If you have one of them hold it, I do believe it increases the amount of healing they get from the Verdant Green Puddle, which would help them stay alive a little bit longer. That is another option. See if I can find this one. Is this one not even on the site? Oh no, it's right there. Okay. Empyrean Core. So this one gives you 100 extra health and 10 extra Omega Power. And at the very, very start of the round, this makes it so that whoever's holding it, their 3 closest allies gain 20 energy, 100 shield, and 5 Omega Power. So optimally, this is again, you're kind of throwing this item onto a support of some sort and giving it to giving the Omega power and energy buff to your backline damage dealers. Or on the contrary, throw this up to your front line to give them that extra 100 shield, extra energy, and maybe, like, say you get that score box ability out faster, or your tank lines Omega's out faster, and give it a little bit of a hit. The only issue, though, is as of right now, it does seem to be a little bit on the underwhelming side. The shield, 100 shield, I mean, that disappears extremely quickly. And then the 5 Omega power isn't not necessarily super valuable enough to warrant repositioning your team for. The energy, the plus 20 energy, is nice. That's probably the best thing about the augment. And so I guess especially for a Scion composition where the whole thing is that you want to get your abilities off as fast as possible, being able to get your first rotation of abilities off quicker would be very valuable. But there are also other augments that do this job maybe a little bit better. So if you happen to have it, by all means, there's still situations where you can use it quite nicely, but a little weak right now. At least personally. Okay. Essence. That's where I am. Essence Siphon. Now this one, very, very straightforward, but still super effective. Gives you 20 Omega power, gives you 5% additional attack speed, but the ability, about as played as it gets, attacks grant you 3 additional bonus energy. Just give this to whatever you want to have its ability come out a little bit faster at the time. Very splashable. You can use this basically on anything. Just whatever you want. Whatever ability you want to come out quicker, throw this to the Illuvial that you want. Mage, fighter, rogue, tank, support, does not matter. The ability of just being able to get that 3 extra energy per attack is extremely valuable to everybody. Fate Sealer. So with the Fate Sealer, this gives you 5% attack speed, 20% attack damage, and with its ability, attacks inflict clumsy onto the target for 3 seconds, and every time you're a part of a takedown, you gain permanent 6% attack speed. So for those unaware, the clumsy debuff, when you put it onto a target, it just makes it so that they lose the ability to dodge. So this is more so targeted towards air compositions. But just knowing that for the most part, for sure, your attack is going to hit, which is extremely nice. And then there is snowball potential, of course, with this Fate Sealer as well. Put this onto any of your attack damage dealers, especially if they are auto attack reliant. Like I've seen, again, Penguins, Scoriox, Umbers, just rogues in general, fighters in general. It's very, very splashable. Give it to anybody who relies on their auto attack as their main portion of damage, and you will find value with this. Pretty much anybody can use it. I was gonna say this gives you shield and starting energy, but no, that is a long patch long ago. That is not at all what this does anymore. Flow Equalizer. So with this one, it gives you 100 health, 10 Omega power, and on Omega, the enemies will lose 8 energy, and your holder's allies will gain 8 energy. So not the holder itself, but your entire team, with the exception of the holder, will gain energy. This to me is super specific because, excuse me, this to me is super splashable, but it's not extremely good, if you know what I'm saying. Like, yes, being able to slow down the entire team's energy production is pretty decent, and buffing your own is pretty cool. But the stats are pretty weak on it to try and compensate. If you do manage to land this, though, you can pretty well put it on anybody. Optimally, somebody with a very quick Omega ability, say like the Atlas Axodon line, where every time it pops its shield, enemies would lose 8 energy and your allies would all gain 8. Because at the same time, or say Axodon in particular, it gets its ability charged extremely quickly as is, so it's probably not going to care if it gets 8 extra energy. But the rest of your allies will absolutely love you for it. So anybody with a fast Omega can make the best use of this. But again, I guess it is kind of very splashable. But it just doesn't feel the greatest per se. And it does reflect that in the win rate, currently only at 36%. While the ability is nice, it's just not enough per se. And if you have another option, I'd probably take the other option. Fury Heart. So with the Fury Heart, has no ability, it just strictly gives you a plus 40% attack damage buff alongside a 3% damage amp buff. So pretty straightforward. You just need to put this on a physical attacker. Put this on Scoriox, put this on a rogue, put this on a fighter, and you will find value. Specifically one that relies on your auto attacks to find the most value of this. But you can absolutely wreck yourself if you end up getting this and you're not planning on going for some sort of attack damage carry. There's been many times, say for example, where I would go into the carousel and I would find the Fury Heart, but I was going for Scions. Let's just say that plus 40% attack damage does not really matter that much when all of your damage is based off of Omega power damage. But for the most part, usually every team is running at least one attack damage reliance carrier brawler. Fury Heart would be a perfect fit for that composition. Goliath Force. So this one, you gain 1% of your max health as physical attack damage, gives you 10% additional attack damage on top of that, while also giving you 300 health. This thing is cheeks. Avoid it. To be plain and simple, you're basically trying to buff the attack damage of one of your tanks, but most tanks have rather slow attack speed to begin with. And again, they're meant to be the tank. They are not usually meant to be the attack damage carry. The only time that I would ever intentionally get this thing is if I have, say, a fighter, whether it be a Riplance or a Jotun or a Farus. If I have a fighter that also has Power Ascent, the legendary augment where it doubles my health, and I can get Goliath Force, then okay, you're kind of cooking. But the amount of things that have to end up going your way to get yourself into that point is pretty rare, and that's why it's one of the only augments I'm seeing here that actually has a less than 30% win rate. not a lot of people over the last 7 days have been able to make this really work for them. It is being ignored now, and it's probably a good idea to just avoid this one. Meanwhile, on the contrary, Guardian's Grid. So at the very start of the battle, and then every 8 seconds afterwards, you will grant a shield to the lowest health ally or 100% of the holder's combined resistances. In regards to statistics, this gives you plus 100 health, 5 resistances, and plus 10% reduction to crit damage against you. So, very simple. Throw this thing onto a tank, and if possible, honestly, get multiple of these, because it is extremely good just being able to constantly pop shields to low health allies. It's like being an empath without actually being an empath, but still getting the buff from it. So you're getting tankier and you're keeping your team alive. Extremely good. Give it to your tank. Immunity Prism gives you 100 health and 10 Omega Power, and upon the combat start, you get to become immune for 15 seconds, which of course, to be specific, this is immune as in you do not get hit by, or you do not get affected by crowd control effects. So roots, stuns, things along those lines you do not have to worry about. While this effect is live, the highest attack speed ally gains 2 Omega Power per second. This thing optimally is used with a magma composition, specifically if you have your flare leveled up to a singed or a seer. You give this item, you give the immunity prism to it. This way, when the seer or the singed uses its ability, because the worst thing with the ability, the spin to win, as I end up calling it, where the singed just spins around and hits everything around it, if it gets stunned, then the ability just stops. So you give this to the tank, you give this to the singed, so that the spin can't be stopped while it's also being super tanky. And then while this is happening, it's giving Omega Power to, say, your Periox or your Scoriox. So kind of hyper specific, but the same idea can work for other things too. It could be just give this to one of your tanks so that a fighter pops off instead. But the combination that comes to mind immediately is for Magma, but it can be implemented with other tank plus fighter, tank plus rogue kind of combinations. But basically just give this to an Illuvial whose Omega can be interrupted, so that they for sure get 1 or 2 rotations of their ability before the immunity wears off. Where are you? Where are you? There you are. The Ion Shroud. So this is basically the baby brother to the Evasive Veil, a legendary augment, where it kind of behaves similarly, but not exactly. So this thing gives you plus 10 attack damage, 150 health, and then 5 attack speed, or 5% attack speed. But instead of at 25%, this at 50% health, it cleanses you and then lets you be untargetable for 2 seconds. So to clarify, the cleanse, so any sort of stun or root that hits you at the time immediately gets removed, and then you go untargetable, so everything looks for a different target while you've essentially disappeared. Again, big value can be given to any alluvial that has an Omega ability that you really want to go off at least once, maybe twice. That would be critical for your team composition to win. So a common one that I personally see is just handing this Ion Shroud to your carry so that no matter what, it at least gets one or two of their abilities off. The biggest outlier for me personally, of course, would be Rampy, Ramp Fight, or Ramp Fire. This allows you to kind of allow for that Ramp Fight, for example, to dive directly into the middle of the enemy team. And even if it gets chunked down, stunned, taken down to less than half, the untargetable will pop, and everybody else looks for a different target, allowing for the Ramp Fight to then pop its ult, which could basically tear your opponent apart. And that would be one of the wisest ways to do this, but again, any target can really make, or any alluvial can really make use of this. I even personally have thrown this onto my Scorebuck or Goliath or a tank that I really want to make sure that, sure, they get focused really quickly at first, but then later on they have a chance to breathe, maybe get some heals, and then get back into the fight. There's a few ways you can get crafty with this, and it's not too bad. I'd recommend it, and it's very splashable. And for the record, when I'm referring to splashable, I mean that you can use it on a wide variety of things. Where art thou? Lifewell. Alright, Lifewell, a very simple, but again, very effective one. It's going to give you 10 resistances and 200 health, and its ability makes it so that the holder heals 3% of their max health every 4 seconds. This one, straightforward, just give it to one of your tanks. Mendo Skeleton gives you 100 health and 10 Omega power. Hold on a second, that's the wrong thing. That's what I thought. Okay, here we go. Mendo Skeleton. So on takedown, the holder heals 8% of its max health and gains 8 resistances. Gives you 10% attack damage, 100 health, and +5 to your crit chance. So this item is meant to be something that you can give to one of your damage dealers to kind of get you snowballing, to make it so that it's one of the last alluvials standing in an end of round scenario, and then be unstoppable at that point. So whether it be your Scoriox, your Rogue, or your Fighter, that's probably the main targets that you're looking here to try and get this item on. Definitely it is a little risky though, because a lot of the value, of course, is based off of getting takedowns. So if you get focused out and taken out early, this item is just going to do nothing. Alright. Mindstorm gives you 20 Omega power and plus 10% to your attack speed. Upon combat start, you get 5 energy regen for 4 seconds. After that, you gain 10 Omega power. So this is basically just meant to jumpstart your first rotation of abilities, while also giving you a little bit of extra Omega power and attack speed. This is a very splashable item. I oftentimes will see this put onto Scions, I've seen this put onto Scorioxes, I've seen this put on the Fighters, I've seen this put onto Rogues. Heck, I've probably seen this put on the support line as well to help get them heals off a little bit quicker. Just being able to get that extra energy regen for that first couple seconds, get that first ability out nice and fast, while giving your ability itself a little boost. Can't really go wrong. Tanks probably get the least amount of effectiveness from this, but everybody else doesn't mind it. Can't go wrong with the Mindstorm. Next up, Overguard. So it gives you 10 mitigation and 200 health. And right off the start, it'll give you a shield to the equivalent of 15% of your max health for about 6 seconds. And then once the shield is gone, you gain 15 resistances. Plain and simple, just give this to your tank, especially if you're going for a 5 bulwark composition to get those extra resistances, so that your tanks are dealing a little bit more extra reflective damage every time they get hit. But to keep it simple, just give it to your tank. Alright. The Phage Fire. So with this one, you get plus 10. With the Phage Fire, you get plus 10% attack damage, 250 health, 10 resistances, and as you are wearing this item, enemies within 20 hexes of you are burned and poisoned. So it's basically the little brother of another item that we've seen in the legendary augments, but the same idea applies, where the burn will reduce healing received by your opponent by 25% in this instance, and then the poison will deal 1% of the target's max health as pure damage every second. So very, very similar in nature, except instead of putting this to a tank, I would opt to give this to one of my fighters, somebody who's not, again, going to be targeted immediately, that can last a round, or at least half the round, or show up in the late game and really pop off. That extra healing reduction can very, very well be the difference maker when the overtime pulses start to come on down, and it'll definitely help you break bunkers as well. Makes you a little bit tanky, so it kind of makes me suggest going more so towards fighters, but I can see this kind of working with rogues, but mainly fighters personally. Phoenix Surge. This will give you 100 extra health alongside 10% attack damage, and its ability is at 40% health, you will gain an additional 20% attack damage and a shield equal to 30% of your max health. This is basically your guardian angel of sorts. If your carry is getting dove on and you need to buy it some time, this is where the Phoenix Surge is going to be your friend. I've seen it put onto rogues, fighters, Scorioxes, but at the end of the day, it's most so due to be used on attack damage carry of some sort. I've seen niche uses where people will throw it onto tanks as well, because since the shield is equal to max health, if you have something with a stupid amount of health, I mean, you can make it work even if it's a tank, but more often than not, this item is a safety net for your carry. With it being more so towards safety, it means it kind of does lack a little bit in regards to damage. And getting that additional 20% attack damage is nice, but the fact that it allows you to be at 40% health to do it is scary. It means you're kind of playing with fire. So it's a little less consistent compared to some of the other damage items we've seen here in the Illuvium Arena. Plasma Catalyst. Plasma Catalyst will give you 10% extra attack damage, 10 Omega Power, as well as plus 20% energy resist piercing, with the ability being that the holder will get 20% of its physical attack damage as energy damage. Again, the little brother to the Arcane Conduit that we had seen in the Legendary Augments. Very, very similar situation. Give this item to somebody that has a bit of a mixed attacker kind of style. Give this to your Polar Bear, your Forest, or maybe a Rogue. Maybe make this work on a Scoriox if you really, really had to. But the idea is that you want to give this to somebody who has decent attack damage, but at the same time would love an additional boost to their Omega Power. So again, the one that comes to mind is like the Polar Bear's Bite would find the most value with this item. Next up is going to be the Power Diverter. Now this thing gives you 10 additional Omega Power as well as 10% attack damage, and every time you fire off your Omega, the holder will gain 7% of its Omega Power as attack speed up to 5 stacks. So again, a mixed attacker will absolutely love this. This is screaming to me Scoriox, because the Scoriox will have a bunch of Omega Powers and would love the additional attack speed as well to just become absolutely ridiculous in the back line. But I could see this used on a Fur Knight even as well, a Blazonite or something along those lines, and be absolutely disgusting to deal with. A lot of people tend to agree as well. It has one of the better win rates currently in the game in regards to regular augments, being around 60% as of the time of this recording. Yikes. I've been yapping for so long, I did not even realize my music changed. Surfer Dude, what's up? How you doing? Forgive me for only seeing your message now. Got me yapping. Alright, Primeval Force. This thing does not have an ability, but what it does not have an ability will kind of make up for it in regards to the stats that it gives you. Plus 20% attack damage, plus 20 Omega Power, and plus 10 attack speed. I say that, however, by taking a look at that win rate, it's only at 43%. While this is a nice general splashable buff that you can basically let any damage dealing alluvial, whether it be magic or physical, really find value with, the amount that it actually gives you, I guess, does not actually make up for the lack of an ability. So keep that in mind if you end up picking this one up. Sure, you can be quite flexible with it, but you'll be missing out on some serious value that one of the other items could possibly give you. In a very, very similar scenario to the last one we've seen, the Rift Striker is also in the same position. Does not have an ability, but it does give you a bunch of stats. This one more so lean towards crit. You get 20% attack damage, plus 20 to your crit chance, and then plus 20 to your attack damage, plus 10% to your crit chance, and plus 10% to your crit amp. So a very, very similar one to the last one that we just saw there, the Primeval Force, but this one more so directed towards rogues. Not bad by any means, but there's definitely things better. But any attack damage reliant Illuvial will not mind picking this up. Rogues will have the most fun though. Safeguard Protocol. So this one gives you 100 health and 10 Omega power. And its ability is pretty plain and simple. Right off the rip, your holder's allies will gain a shield of 200 for 10 seconds. Just giving you, of course, that a little extra buffer, I suppose, for the early portions of a battle. Could be nice if you are going up against a bunch of rogues that you know are just trying to front load their damage, or going up against Scions, for example, that are going to try and front load a bunch of damage immediately. However, it is a very underwhelming ability. 200 shield for 10 seconds is very weak, in my opinion. In regards to who you would give this to, you just basically give this to your tank so that they get a little bit of an extra boost in their health, or give this to a support. Because notes that it's the holder's allies that gains the shield and not the holder themselves. So there is a lot left to be desired here for this Safeguard Protocol. It is unfortunately one of those support augments that do fall behind. Win rate's not too bad. I mean, it's still sitting there at 52, so a lot of people are being able to use it well. But the fact that I guess you're just able to kind of splash it onto any team is quite nice. Speaking of shields, where are you? Shield Bane. Okay, so the Shield Bane, so this thing statistically will give you plus 10 to your, or plus 10% to your attack damage, plus 10 Omega power, as well as an additional plus 10 to your starting energy. Then after damaging a shield, gaining an additional 25% damage amp for 4 seconds. Now this one, unfortunately, has a little bit of a lot left to be desired. Because, like, yeah, you're going to be attacking the shield, you then do score the damage amp, but the rest of the stats are kind of falling behind compared to other things. It's, of course, reliant on your opponent actually running shields, so it is nice if you're trying to bust the bunker. But if there is one Illuvial in particular that I've seen actually abuse the hell out of this augment, it would actually be the Ace, or the Ace, Arctace, Monarch line, the AC-130s as I would call them. But what it doesn't say is, like, just talking about damaging a shield. It doesn't clarify that this also accounts for your ability. So if you're going up against somebody that does have a bunch of shields, and you do the Ace Carpet Bomb on them, when that ace lands, it is going to be hitting like a truck for only those 4 seconds. Hopefully, within that 4 seconds, you get enough burst damage done that you can find value with this. And the person and the people that I've seen actually use this stacked like 2 of these, and then 1 auto-attacking augment on top of it to find value. But even then, I don't want to call it a cheese, but it's probably kind of feels like it. But like that is the only real niche situation that I could kind of find, like specifically going for shield main. It is splashable at least though. Like you can just give this to any of your attack, not even attack damage, just any of your carries. If you happen to get a hold of it. The additional damage amp is quite nice, and I do believe it does count towards your Omega power as well. Or your Omega ability as well, I should say. It's like, I'm not going to go out of my way for this thing, but if I get it, I'm not mad, and I can give it to pretty well anybody. Funny enough, this one doesn't even have a description on the website, but it's just because I want to make the joke that it's just because it's that bad. But no, I guess it does have its opportunities. But if I recall correctly, the sit down is basically just there to steal the resistances of whatever enemy is closest to you. So whether it be on a fighter or a tank, that's probably where you'd want to use it, but this is another one of those items or one of these augments that I would not recommend going out of your way for. But if you happen to get it, I mean, it works out. You can kind of splash it onto your front line. Okay, the Spellweaver's Aegis. This is one that I've definitely neglected for a little while, and I'm only kind of starting to use now. And I wish I've used it sooner, because in terms of statistics, this gives me only 20 Omega power and then plus 5 to my resistances. But off the rip, it'll give you a shield equal to 50 or 15% of your max health for 7 seconds, and then as soon as the shield goes down, it gives you additional Omega power, 15 Omega power to be specific. So what I've personally started doing is giving this to my scions that I am worried about getting picked off by splash damage early in the round, or if it's going up against a ramp fight or something along those lines. I've given this to an Ophisto before, I've given this to my Alfie, and just so it can survive that extra stray damage that kind of comes around early on in the battle and then hit back that much harder. But at the same time, you could very well give this over to a tank that is not too afraid to do some damage either. So like a Singed or a Seer, end up doing something along those lines. Maybe give this to a support, give this to like an Archelion or an Adordo or something along those lines. Anything that very well, I guess, could get kind of picked off by stray damage, but then also you kind of buy it that time to get healed up because of that extra shield. It's a weird one. It's one that I know I've definitely not quite flushed out personally, so I will say, like, if there's any of these augments that like have a grain of salt with in terms of who I would put it on, this would be one of them. But at the same time, you can be rather flexible with it, and I can see uses for it in almost any alluvial. Okay, next up, almost there. Steadfast Pulse. So this thing is a bunker composition's best friend, and it gives you 100 health plus 10 to your Omega power as well. And every 4 seconds, the holder as well as the allies around it within 20 hexes get 3 mitigation, which reduces all incoming damage. So the go-to that I see for this often revolves around Archelion and the bunker composition. Since that Archelion is in the middle of the team, You give it the steadfast pulse here, and then everything around it slowly but surely starts getting more and more tanky. And the idea is that your front line is holding up the opponent for so long that multiple procs here of this steadfast pulse goes off to the point where you're maybe getting plus 12, plus 15, if not more, mitigation to your backline, which are supposed to be squishy. But by the time that your opponents get there, they're actually surprisingly tanky and hard to take out. In crazy scenarios, I have seen people take 2, maybe 3 of these steadfast pulses and throwing it onto the Archelion and make it so that backline almost feels unkillable. Definitely an option, but it requires heavily on your team being bunched up together. That 20 hexes, it sounds like a lot, but to be completely honest with you, that is not a big space to really work with. So your team has to really be huddled in order to make this work. But if you get yourself into the right position, it's extremely valuable. The Sunder Matrix. So every 3 attacks steal 1 Omega power and 1% attack damage from the target, while also giving you 15% piercing, while also giving you plus 10% to your attack damage and plus 10 Omega power. Avoid this thing if you have the opportunity to pick something different. It has probably one of the lowest win rates I've seen on the board here, not even 40% as of the time of this recording. Just stealing so little attack damage, so little Omega power is brutal. The stats don't make up for it. The piercing is nice, but it's not enough to make for such a lackluster ability, especially since for the most part, you've probably had 2 other options that you can pick of, and one of those 2 options are probably better than the Sunder Matrix. If you have to end up using this thing, just give it to something that attacks really, really quickly to try and make the most of it. Give it to your Rogue, give it to your Scoriox or something along those lines. Try to make something out of it, but there is so much better that you could find. Titan's Boon, this one is very straightforward, but very, very effective. Statistically, it's going to give you an additional 450 health, but it also will then give you 6% max health on top of that. Plain and simple, just give this to your tank, it'll love you for it. Can't complain with additional health. That was the Titan's Boon, but what about the Titan's Bane? So this one gives you plus 10 to your attack speed, plus 20%, or excuse me, this one gives you plus 10% to your attack speed, plus 20% to your attack damage, while also having the additional effect of having your attacks deal an additional 1% of the target's max health as pure damage. Of course, again, little brother or little sister here to the legendary augment that is available, where it does 6% of the target's max health. This one, of course, much smaller with it just being 1%, but can still find some value, making it so that you're just hitting higher health targets for just that little bit more. Give this to your Rogue, your Fighter, or your Scoriox, and you will be in great shape. The Veil Piercer. So this thing gives you plus 5% to your attack speed, plus 10% to your, plus 5% to your attack speed, plus 10 Omega power, plus 10% to your attack damage, and each of your attacks will give you 2 Omega power up to 15 stacks, so an additional 30 Omega power. And then after 10 seconds, gain True Sight, so none of your attacks can be dodged. This, to me, just screams, again, auto attack damage dealer, especially the Scoriox. Would absolutely love to be able to take advantage of this from afar, but at the same time, Rogues and Fighters do not mind either. Give this to your attack damage carry. The Vengeful Mantle. So when struck by an attack, you'll deal 70 physical damage to enemies within 20 hexes, plus 10 to your physical resistance, as well as plus 200 health. Just give this to your tank for a little extra reflective damage, and in theory, give this to whatever tank is going to go in. I guess whether it be off tank or main tank, does not matter. Just give this to your tank. All right, we almost did it here, the last one. Last on the docket is going to be the Vorpal Crest. Now this thing will give you plus 5% crit chance, plus 20% to your attack damage, and its ability is that takedowns will grant you an additional 4% attack damage and an additional 4% crit amplification. So every time you crit, you'll crit a little bit harder. While snowballing augments can tend to be rather crazy, this one I find extremely lackluster. I get that you're trying to put this onto a rogue or put this onto your fighter, but the amount of stats you get off the start are rather underwhelming, and you do not get anything additional until you get your first takedown. Then you start snowballing, but there is no sustain as a part of this augment. There are plenty of augments that do something similar to this, but better, or can help you more than this augment would. I've definitely tried to avoid it. However, if you do end up finding yourself with a Vorpal Crest from like the carousel or something, throw this onto your rogue, throw this onto your fighter, or your Scoriox or something if you have absolutely nothing else better at the time. Whew. Well, that was fun. I should probably do some sort of closeout for that now, should I? Or shouldn't I? Of course, big thank you for watching the video. I hope this helps you in your Illuvium Arena journey, and hope that this helps you get on the right track as to knowing kind of which augments to use for which Illuvials. Of course, like I was saying before, I am not a professional player by any means, but I've been playing for a while. Hopefully, I can get you on the right track and watch you soar and climb the rankings in the arena. That can work. Ugh. Now here's the real challenge. I don't think I'm that crazy though, am I? Okay, do I attempt to edit this before I go to bed? I'm already over time and I'm already dying a little, so probably not. Yeah, it should be about time to close things up here. So a very, very productive day. Thank you for anybody who tuned in to listen and learn with me live here. And of course, big thank you to the Illuvium community. Of course, that is exactly how I got the idea for this stream and for this video. Specifically Ziggy Reviews for giving me that idea. Oh. but I can definitely tell I'm a little out of it. So again, my plans for weekend, of course, good luck to everybody who's competing in the IPL 250 tomorrow. It's pretty crazy to see that 251 players ended up entering this tournament. Of course, congratulations to the top 8 of the leaderboard as well. I'm definitely going to be following it the best that I can, but of course I am at a wedding this weekend, so there will be no cast or stream from me for the event. On Tuesday, when I do my regularly scheduled stream, I'll probably do an IPL 250 recap. And if there happens to be any cool clips or a stream that I can kind of review, maybe we'll do that together. Otherwise, it'll just be on to the next thing. And again, big thank you to the Illuvium community for all of the love so far since I started taking up the game for content. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm still enjoying myself, but I am exhausted. So I will be calling it a night. Thank you so much. I will catch you on the next one.